Rachel Reeves, our Chancellor, has made an absolute horlicks of things. Now, I call it the 3 S's. She has delivered a shockingly bad hand, so she was delivered that. That we can't particularly blame her for. But then she set up some stupid rules, i.e. not raising income tax, VAT or national insurance, which you could argue she's already broken one of them.
Not going to increase the taxes that working people pay, their income tax, their national insurance and their VAT.
And she has screwed up on pretty much everything she's put forward, from pensioners to farmers to the sick and disabled.
We had to make difficult decisions last year. The public finances were in a total mess when I became Chancellor last summer, and we had to take immediate action to get control and get a grip of the public finances. We have been able to do that. We've returned stability to the economy. In the first quarter of this year, our economy was the fastest growing in all of the G7, which now means we're able to make different choices. And that's why today I can announce that this winter, 9 million pensioners will now receive the winter fuel payment.
Yeah, I mean, she's basically made a right mess of everything, really. Tell me I'm wrong. After hiking our taxes up by £40 billion the last time and promising she's not coming back for more, what did she call it, a once-in-a-parliament?
But this is a once-in-a-parliament budget to wipe the slate clean after the mess that the Conservatives have left us.
Yeah, but she's back for another £35 billion. Something went wrong. Of course it did. After the early morning press conference that she called a few weeks ago, where she said absolutely nothing and spooked the markets, appearing to test the water on the raise on income tax, something that she said she would never do.
Mine will be a budget for growth, with fairness at its heart, and a budget that supports businesses to create jobs and to innovate. As I take my decisions on both tax and spend, I will do what is necessary to protect families from high inflation and interest rates, to protect our public services from a return to austerity, and to ensure that the economy that we hand down to future generations is secure, with debt under control.
Great. How are you going to do that, Rachel? Not sure what all that was about, but the budget on Wednesday is her make and break. I say she's already broken. She's apparently set to freeze income tax thresholds, which is ultimately an income tax raise by the back door. It won't really affect the higher earners who have already passed them, but more so will drag unsuspecting middle earners into higher tax brackets. It will cost basic taxpayers an average of just over £400 a year. And for those dragged into the higher rate, they'll have to stump up on average an extra £1,129 a year, which is almost £100 a month. There's also talk that she's planning to reduce the cash ISA allowance. Why would you want to do that? It's beyond me why you'd consider that one. And she may even dip into salary sacrifice schemes. So that's pensions and medical cover courtesy of employers, thereby effectively putting potential strain on the NHS and pension savings. A very short-sighted measure which will have negative repercussions for the economy in the future. No mention of cutting spending, which could solve the crisis, and no mention of growth. No doubt she'll spin this as making difficult but necessary decisions. Rubbish. Cut public spending, Rachel. It's out of control. In Maggie's day, it was at 33% of economic income, but right now it's at 45% and climbing. In a recent article, Rachel said that she's often overlooked and underestimated and has described her critics as sexist and mansplaining. No, Rachel, I haven't overlooked or underestimated your ability to do serious damage to the economy. In my view, you're an economic hazard. So take it from me, a woman, and the YouGov poll full of men and women across the board who've said that they have zero confidence in the economy under Labour. Rachel, that means there is zero confidence in you. The real decision to make is whether you are fit to be Chancellor. A tough one, but I think we all know the answer.
We're living in a time of what feels like pretty significant social change, and it makes us question things that we've even taken for granted for decades. And one of those at the moment that people are wondering about is actually money. Is the money in your bank account safe? Should you be investing elsewhere? Are we looking at a potential global crash? What will it mean for your savings? Is there a way that you could be using your money that might be outside of government control even? Well, TallyMoney is potentially one solution. So I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by the CEO and founder of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. What is TallyMoney?
Well, at TallyMoney, you basically get gold you can spend. So we give people an individual account in their name, everyday account. They get a sort code, an account number. They use that account just like they would pounds from their bank, but it's milligrams of gold that we brand as Tally.
Okay. Why would you do that, though? What is the benefit to the customer instead of just having a normal pound sterling account?
Gold's performance against the pound is above 11% per annum over the last 25 years on average. But we still need money in our daily lives, and we have savings. We know that it's good common sense and prudent to save up for things, not just living credit. You know, whether it's a holiday or a rainy day, your retirement planning, you need to have money in your life, basically, that you can rely on, that's dependable, that nobody meddles with, that nobody can weaponise against you, which is another element of government control when it's the government currency, which we could talk about another time. And it should be pretty simple and straightforward, and that's what we deliver at Tally. And really, we just want people to feel safe and happy with their money. There was a time when the bigger your bank balance, the more confident you felt. Now it's like, I need to do something with it. I can't leave it there. In Tally, you can.
Okay, brilliant. Cameron Parry from TallyMoney, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bev.
So I'm joined now by Labour councillor Sebastian Salek. Sebastian, have I been completely unfair to Rachel Reeves?
Well, now the key thing is we don't know what's going to be in the budget. So
that's true.
Can't comment on anything that we haven't seen yet. So we're really in a holding pattern now where we'll sit down next week, we will digest the contents of what comes out, and we'll be able to make a proper assessment then.
But some of the things that she's put forward, and by that we know that these leaks come out almost to test the market, some of those things are sort of a freeze on income tax, which would be a raise, really, a tax rise through the back door. Would she be wise to do that?
Well, it might be a sensible thing to do. I think it would raise about £8 billion, which is a decent chunk of money, and it goes a long way to filling the gap that she has to fill. Look, in terms of thinking about principles here, I think it's really sensible that she set these fiscal rules. I think it's really sensible that she is not continuing to borrow, spend as governments have done in the past. We saw that happen particularly during COVID, and you might argue that it was necessary then. We had a lot of priorities to address. But after that period, where we are now, you have to be able to turn the ship around and create some semblance of stability. And I think that's what Rachel Reeves is trying to do.
If she does freeze income tax thresholds, would that be a breach of the manifesto promise not to raise taxes? Income tax?
You could argue it is, you could argue it isn't. It's all semantics, really. I think what really matters and what people watching at home will care about is what is going to happen to the economy. If she freezes those thresholds but then manages to turn the economy around, is anyone really going to care?
Well, I think they will care, especially if they're losing quite a bit of money. But the turnaround of the economy, I don't think will be done just through income tax. But the question I'm raising is, if she does that, though, would you see that as a breach of a manifesto promise? I mean, you personally, she said that she wouldn't raise income taxes. It is a tax rise on income, even if it's not specifically income tax. Or would you see that that would be fair cop and she's not breached the manifesto promise if she does that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think if you tried hard enough, you could argue that most tax rises are a breach of the manifesto pledges. It all just comes down to how far you want to twist logic. And I really don't think it matters very much whether it is or whether it isn't, because in the end, all Rachel Reeves needs to do, and she knows this and she says this, is to create that growth. Now, you're right, it is going to take time. But I think it's a result of all of these piecemeal changes that we're probably going to see in the budget next week that will help us get there.
Well, there's been, of all the things that have been leaked in terms of rumour, there's been very little about whether she's going to cut spending. Now, cutting spending, bearing in mind that the welfare reforms failed and the last time, it was their own backbenchers that stopped it from going through. I would have liked to heard more about that. Do you think that Rachel would be wise to cut welfare spending?
Yeah, look, I don't think she's going to cut welfare spending in this budget. I think those cuts that were mooted and were planned earlier in the year should have gone through. But remember, those were only a very small part of the money that we need to raise. If you're going to advocate for cutting, you have to ask the question, what are we going to cut? The problem is cutting has been the order of the day since 2010 when Cameron came in with austerity. And frankly, there was very little left to cut. And we see that through all the other stories you talk about on your channel. You've got people escaping from prisons because the prison service is on its knees. You've got doctors trying to go on strike because they don't feel like they've been paid enough because we've seen cuts from the NHS from the Tories over so long. And that is really symptomatic of this issue, that there is nothing left to cut. So if anybody's making that argument, they really have to build a very strong case of what exactly are they saying that we need to get rid of, because there really isn't.
Well, you've seen a huge rise of people who are claiming benefits for anxiety and that kind of stuff. Like, sometimes I get up, I feel anxious. I think, Nigel Farage made a very funny quote one time when he said that he's anxious every day. Most of us are. And some people are literally signed off for almost ever for anxiety. Now, do you think that perhaps that could have been an area where she could have looked at, really? Because really, I would have thought that the answer to those things are actually going back to work and trying to get yourself back into the social situation and around people.
Oh, definitely. We have to make sure that people are getting into work. But I think the solution, to say that the solution is let's just push them back into work by taking their benefits away, is a little bit of a blunt one. There is clearly an underlying issue here. If so many people suddenly are feeling anxious, I have done myself, not to the point where I couldn't work, but the point where it became very difficult. So I have a lot of sympathy with this. And I think the key here really is to solve that underlying issue, make sure that that is prevented, rather than getting all these people falling into this position where suddenly they need help, is a much more sensible way than just taking their money away and say, look, deal with it. That's, I think, not the kind of country we are. We're a little bit more supportive of people when they need help.
And of course, we're spending a lot of money on migration and things like that. I just wanted to get your thoughts on Shabana Mahmood and her plans. Do you think that Shabana Mahmood is onto the right track with her plans in terms of illegal migration and migration in general?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you and I and everybody at home would agree that the current asylum system just isn't working. It doesn't work for British people who live here. It doesn't work for asylum seekers who come over, who just end up in this holding pattern where they're living in hotels, which lots of people don't like. They don't particularly like living there either. So it really isn't serving anyone. I see a lot of progressive stuff, actually, in what Shabana Mahmood is saying. She's talking about new routes to asylum, legal routes, which is really important. We don't have many of those, if any, at the moment. I think we've shut them all down. And also allowing some asylum seekers to work and to start contributing, which is really important because you have to allow people to take part in the economy rather than just to keep them in these hotels, which isn't serving anyone. So I think there's a lot to be said there. And of course, it is addressing this issue, which nobody can deny a lot of people care a lot about. So I don't think Labour can get away with not addressing it, which is why I'm really pleased that she's doing it so boldly.
And then finally on Rachel Reeves, if she breaches her manifesto promise, any of them, so the national insurance, which I think, in my view, I feel it's already been broken, really, but income tax, if she directly breaks that, and of course VAT, should she be asked to resign? Because bearing in mind there was that survey, a YouGov survey, not from GB News viewers, but from people all over the country, who said they have zero confidence in Labour's handling of the economy.
Yeah, look, I don't think we should govern by poll. And for what it's worth, I don't think she is going to break those pledges. It doesn't sound like she's going to do that. But if she did, I would have some sympathy with that for this reason. The economy is movable. It's always changing. And I think it's in the best interest of the country to address the economy as it is today, rather than as it was in the lead up to the 2024 election. So if things change, you have to have that flexibility to be able to address it. If that means breaking your promises, whatever those are, whether that's Reeves's promises or any other Chancellor's promises, I think that should be allowed as a matter of principle, but probably isn't going to happen this week.
Well, so was she naive then in saying that she's not going to break something? Because what you just said is true. You should have the flexibility to be able to move things. So if it were me, I would never say that I'm not going to raise these things, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. To me, that sounds like a sort of foolish way of making such a big pledge. People might have voted for them specifically. If I were going to be Chancellor, I would definitely give myself leeway. Do you think she's backed herself into a corner?
No, I see what you're saying, but I think you could only ever make promises based on the information you have in front of you at the time. And clearly, when the Chancellor and her team came in after winning the election, they found a much murkier picture in the country's finances than they'd expected. That has been really difficult. The external picture has been really difficult. I'm talking about Trump and his tariffs and everything else the global economy has thrown at us. None of that was foreseeable at the time. Trump wasn't even the president at the time. So a lot has changed in a very short amount of time. And I think that should allow for some flexibility, which is in the best interest of the country.